So when you're doing 2-point perspective, you want to keep in mind that you're only going to be seeing the ceiling, the floor, and then 2 walls that are next to each other. You're not actually going to be able to see a third wall at all. So when you're designing your floor plan, think about which perspective you want to draw in, and that might influence where you put things. For example, in my floor plan here, when I did the 1-point version, which is here, I was thinking, okay, I see 3 walls, a ceiling, and a floor, so I'm going to put things on all 3 walls. However, if you're doing the 2-point version, you're only going to see things on 2 walls, so just keep that in mind before you lay out your floor plan. Now, when we get started, even though this isn't your official project, it's just good to practice this. You want to add a 1/2-inch border on the edges of your paper. A couple of reasons why we do this that I will remind you of. It just makes your art look nice. However, we decide to end up coloring these, it just gives a nice border to your work. If it ends up going in a mat or a frame, it leaves a little bit of wiggle room so that none of your artwork gets cut off. So I'm just measuring from a 1/2 inch all the way around. And then I'm going to bridge those gaps. I'm drawing pretty heavy in this video, just for the sake of you being able to see it on the camera. But like always, I really encourage you to draw lightly, especially since with perspective drawing, you often have to move things around a lot and erase things, extend them, shorten them. So just make sure that you continue to apply light pressure with your pencil. Get one more line in here. Okay, so now we've got our 1/2 inch border. And now we want to figure out where we want our vanishing points to be. So I'm thinking that I'm going to put them right in the center. So if this is 8 inches across, we go to 4 inches. And 4 inches. So these 2 marks right here are our vanishing points. Okay. Now, I typically, when I'm doing 1-point perspective, let me draw you a quick diagram. So basically, let's say that this is our piece of paper. I will usually show more of one wall than another wall. So what I'm doing here is adding an edge over here, and that's basically a back corner of the wall, and then you've got a wall over here and a smaller wall over here, so it just allows you more space to kind of play around with stuff. So I'm actually going to be doing something like that here. So instead of like putting my corners right in the center, I'm going to put it slightly off center. You might not want to do this in your official project, but just do this with me for today just while we're practicing, because you might realize that you end up liking it. So right now we're getting the back corner of our wall. So if this is our drawing, this is the corner. Let's say that this is where like the counter is going to be, for example. So figuring out where we want our corner to go, we want to make sure that our ruler is nice and vertical. I'm going to put my corner not super off center. Let's say that we put it about right here. I'm going to make it about that tall. I'm just kind of brainstorming how I want to lay this out. I'm actually going to make it a little bit taller. Okay, so we've got our basic edge of our wall here. Now, just like we usually do in the 2-point perspective, from each end of the line, we want to line it up with one of the vanishing points. So for now, I'm going from here over here, draw a line that goes out. Same thing this way. From this vanishing point to the top of the line. Drawing another orthogonal. Same thing over here, lining up this vanishing point with the bottom of this line, bringing it out. And same thing over here, this point with the bottom of the line and bringing it out. So now we've got our very basic setup for our room. Now, if you wanted to see less of the ceiling, you would move this line higher up, okay? So right now, this is just pretty like middle of the road where everything is. Okay, so now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a counter where, people sell coffee, for example. So in my little imaginary business here, this is a cafe, and I thought about everything that would go in the cafe. You need a counter, maybe a display case for the food, tables, seating, menu on the wall, lighting, a door, windows, and things like that. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the process of adding in a few of these basic things. I'm not following my floor plan exactly because things change, and the way that this room is set up is a little bit different than my original floor plan idea. So you just want to make sure that you're being flexible. So to start off this counter, I want to first start out with an edge. Remember, this is not one-point perspective, so we're not starting with like a parallelogram or something like that. We're starting with an edge. So just follow along with me here and you'll start to see this shine through. I'm going to add a line just like so. Okay, I'm actually going to make it, that's a good height actually. Okay, so from this line, from the top here, just like we just did with the walls, bring it over to the vanishing point. I'm going to actually just stop right there. I don't want to go all the way to the vanishing point because I don't need to. Do the same thing with this vanishing point. Draw a line that comes out. I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom line down here. And I'm going to stop where the bottom meets the edge of the wall over here. I'm going to bring that over. Okay, now from here we want to add in our other vertical lines, so make sure that your ruler is vertical. I'm going to cut this off right here, and I'm going to erase that extra I don't need. Doing the same thing this way, cutting it off. Okay. And now from this corner, we got to bring it over to the vanishing point. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better what we're doing. So I'm going from this corner to this vanishing point. And then from this corner to that vanishing point. And we have our basic rectangular prism now. So that's your counter, basically. And we can erase these lines on the inside because our counter is not see-through. Now, here's something that you might want to think about. Okay, are people going to be able to get behind this counter? That might be something that makes you say, oh, okay, maybe I need to make this a little bit skinnier then. Make it a little bit skinnier so that people can fit behind it. That's something that I always forget when I'm doing perspective drawing for businesses, is leaving room behind counters and tables and things like that. So now there's some clearance behind the wall. With perspective drawing, it's really a lot of erasing and readjusting. That's why it's important to draw light. Okay. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, we've got our counter. I'm going to do a display case on top of it. So if I'm to show you the 1-point version of it, my display case is this nice rounded form. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It's actually pretty straightforward. So basically we have to do what we just did, except we're just going to add another smaller rectangular prism on top of the counter. So you want to decide where the counter ends and the display case begins. For me, I'm just going to cut it off about right here. Okay. Now we need a vertical line for the closest edge. Okay. We want to bring it over vanishing point both ways. A little bit longer actually. Okay. I'm going to add in those verticals for those edges. This one's kind of a tight squeeze because it's pretty much perfectly in line with the vanishing points. So you're not going to see a whole lot of the top of the counter. Okay. And then we do that last line that shows that back edge there. So now we've got a transparent case. Now, if you want it to be rounded, like an ice cream display, it's actually really straightforward. All you have to do is just between these two corners, add little half circles, just like so. And then you can just erase all of these lines that we just did. So those lines were important for figuring out like the basics of where everything was. But once you've got that stuff settled, you can just sort of adapt them as you need to. And then just clean things up. Okay, so then you have a nice little case there. Okay, let's get a menu on the wall. The menu is probably the most straightforward, simple thing. It's just a shape that's on the wall, so let's give it an edge here. Let's make it a little bit taller, actually. And then since this menu is on this wall, all of the orthogonals are going to go to this vanishing point. And if you're not sure what I mean by that, just watch for a second. Orthogonal. Because this is a flat thing, it doesn't have three-dimensionality. We don't need to worry about the other orthogonal line here. We just need one. Just like so. And then you can just jazz it up however you want. Okay, so we've got that settled. Let's actually get, let me take a look and see what I put at my 1 point. Let's get a door and a table and chair in here. So when you're doing a doorway, you want to start very similarly to how we did the menu. So I'm just going to say that my edge of the door is the side of my composition here. And then this is the other edge of the door. Okay, so that's how wide the doorway is going to be. To get the top of the door frame, I want to line up this corner with this vanishing point over here. Bring it across. Okay, and then if you want your door, if you want it to just be a flat closed door, you could just leave it like this and then like add some decor. But if you want it to be an open door, like it's implying that there's another room right next to it, if you want to give it thickness, like the illusion that the door, I guess you would call it the jamb of the door, if you want to give it the illusion that it has thickness, what you want to do is line up this corner. Just do this with me. Line up this corner with this vanishing point. Draw a little orthogonal line. And then line up the end of this line with this vanishing point over here. And then bring it across. Okay. And then you line up this end with this vanishing point. Bring it in. And then just connect with a vertical line. Okay, so this is just sort of giving the illusion that the door frame has thickness. We'll put some like little Christmas lights or something over it. And you can just walk through there, okay? Okay, table and chairs. This is a slightly more complicated shape, so just bear with me. So when we're starting our table, we want to figure out how tall our table is. Let's say that it comes up to about here. Like this is that closest edge of the table. Okay, so just draw this with me. We're going to draw a solid rectangular prism. Let's bring, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Let's move this over a little bit. Let's move this to be about right here. I know it doesn't seem like it makes a big difference, but it will down the road as we're drawing. So from each end of that line, we're going to go a little bit over. I'm actually going to make this line a little bit shorter. So we're going over to the vanishing point just a little bit. I'm going to give it an edge. And then from over here, line up those ends with the other vanishing point. Figure out how long and wide you want your table to be. So that's the side of the table there. And then from these two tops of these lines, we're going to go back over to those opposing vanishing points. Let's bring it over. And bring it over. And now we've got a tabletop. So it's not a complete table yet, but we're going to get there. So if we're going to figure out where the legs are, we actually need to kind of backtrack a little bit. So go ahead and from the edges of the table, bring those vertical lines down. Same with this back one, just add another vertical line there. Okay, we're figuring out where the feet of the table go. From this end right here, that closest foot, that closest leg of the table, go ahead and draw some orthogonals to those vanishing points. Bring it over. And we're going to do the same thing with these back legs. I know it sort of seems like we're just making a cube, but it really is going to help us figure out where exactly the legs go so that they don't look funky and out of perspective. Okay, so what this is telling us now is these corners that we just made, those are where the legs stop. So basically what I can do now is just bring down, I should use a ruler to do this, so just keep that in mind, but I'm just bringing down some vertical lines and just kind of rounding them out at the bottom. And that just shows you where the table legs go. And then you can erase the extra. Okay. If you're doing a chair, it's actually a very similar process. I'm going to start with the seat of the chair, and I'm going to put the seat of it, I'm just kind of envisioning where it's going to go here. Let's put a line right here. With 2-point, it takes a little bit more planning ahead for where exactly things need to be. You might put a chair somewhere and realize like, whoa, that's way too short, or that table's way too tall. How could anybody sit at that? It just takes a little bit of foresight to think about where things should be placed. And it's a skill that you just practice. Okay. So from these two edges, I'm going over to the vanishing points. And I'm hoping this chair doesn't look too tall when I'm done. Okay. So this is basically just like the table process. We're just drawing little short stools here. Now, if you wanted to add a back to the chair, let's actually just do the legs first before we get too ahead of ourselves. This is the exact same process as the table that I'm doing right now. Oopsies. Okay. Sorry, dropped my eraser there. Okay. So if we want to add a back to the chair, actually pretty straightforward. We want to line it back up with this edge of the chair and draw a vertical line coming out. And you get to figure out how tall you want the back of your chair to be. From the top of that line, go ahead and bring it over towards the vanishing point. And then we get to add another vertical here. Okay. And then if we want the chair back to have some thickness to it, it's basically like we're just making another rectangular prism. That's all really perspective drawing is just a lot of creating shapes by carving out of rectangular prisms. So once you figure out how to do that, you can really draw anything in perspective. Okay, so I've got a basic table and a chair there. Let's get a bookshelf in here. That's probably one of the more tricky things to sort of wrap your head around, but once you get a feel for it, like with anything, it's actually pretty straightforward. So we're going to start by basically, again, using a rectangular prism, and then we're going to sort of add shelves into it. So right over here, just follow along with me for a moment. Let's add, I'm going to actually make this like a short bookshelf, or a short shelf that is sort of like, it only has like one shelf on it. So it's pretty straightforward for you guys. So I'm starting with an edge, just like with any box that we're drawing. We're going to add some orthogonals. I'm going to make this kind of a long shelf. Okay, and then we don't want to forget the underside of the shelf that we can see. Just like so. Okay. Now from here, we got to figure out where the inner shelves are going to go. So this might be kind of confusing, but just follow along with me for a moment. Let's put a shelf that just kind of cuts across the center here. And before we do that, let's actually make our shelf see-through, because that's actually kind of important for getting the shelf effect. So to do that, I just went from these two corners over to the orthogonals. And then just brought down the back edge. So we got a see-through frame here. Okay, so to figure out where our shelf is going to go, let's actually make two little tick marks right here. Okay, that's going to show where our shelf is. From those tick marks, it's kind of like we're segmenting off this is where our shelf is going to be. From each of those two tick marks, or from each end of that darkened line, bring some orthogonals over and then just stop it at the back of the bookshelf. Do the same thing from this side. Oop. Okay, good. Now, from this corner and this corner, we want to add some more orthogonals. So starting with this one, lining up my ruler, lining it up with this vanishing point, and you're going to bring that orthogonal line over to there. Okay, just like that. From this line, you're going to bring it on over until it connects with the end of that line that you just made. This is basically the entire shelf. All you really need to do now is just erase the extra. So I don't want the side of my bookshelf to be see-through. We wanted the inside of it to be see-through because a shelf is like an open thing. It's not like a closed object. It's got like an opening to it where you can look inside of it. So I'm only erasing these little segments here. Okay, so that's your shelf. And since we're looking up at this shelf, you can put some little objects on it, little flower pots or something. Okay, so that's some basic furniture. I'm going to do one more thing, and that's to show you, actually I'm going to do a couple more things. The first thing is lighting. Like, let's say that you have some lights that are sort of built in to the wall, like they're recessed into the ceiling. So let's say that you have a light that's like right here, okay? And as they get closer to you, they get bigger, okay? We know that because of size variation. So if your lights are traveling this way along the ceiling, you just want to make sure that from each edge of those recessed lights, there's some orthogonals, and that is basically showing you how much wider they get as they move over. Okay, same thing with if you have like a hanging light. Let me just kind of pop one in here really quick, just to show you what I mean. So let's say that I've got a lamp. It's kind of covering the menu sign here. And it hangs from the ceiling like so. Okay. Now, if I wanted these to kind of go along the wall and have them realistically get smaller, again, I want to think about my orthogonals. Do they fit in this space? Where is the trajectory that they follow? So the lamps would keep following this trajectory like that. Again, this isn't something that like you have to necessarily do, but if you want to really challenge yourself with perspective and have things realistically look like they're receding into space, this is what you have to do. You want to make sure that your orthogonal lines are really your best friends here. That fits in that area. That fits like that. So see how I'm just using those lines to kind of map out where things go, okay? Let's do a window, and then we're going to call it. So similar to when we did the menu, we just want to get the basic like edges of the window to start, and then we're going to add some thickness. So because the window is on this wall, we want to have all of our orthogonals going over to this vanishing point. Okay, and then we're going to get our vertical in here. Okay, now from these two corners here, we're going to draw some really short orthogonals that go over to this vanishing point. There's one. This one might be this one's kind of tricky because it's like right in line with the bottom of the window, so you don't really see too much of it. We bring in a vertical, and then we draw from this corner an orthogonal that goes over to that vanishing point. And you want to make sure your ruler doesn't slide around on you, because that's not good craftsmanship. Okay, so you've got a basic opening of a window, and then you can put more little plants or whatever, cactuses or whatever your shop is themed around. So those are some basics for drawing in 2-point perspective. Again, you might not have a coffee shop necessarily, but the Like the skills that you're learning by doing this can be applied to any kind of business, whether, it's like a beauty, skincare kind of deal or a jewelry shop or anything like that. You're going to have things like counters and tables and lighting and, decorations on the walls and shelving and things like that. So these are just some really basic things that you can take with you to whatever interior business that you are designing. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, just let me know. And good job.